Come with the professor to the laboratory. Do you hear the hum of the laboratory artwork? It's early in the morning. It's snowing. I had a restless mind last night. A little too much caffeine. But it was primed with Jean Shepard stories. So here we go. Come with the professor 55 years ago to when he was a child. And there were walkie-talkies. My brother had gotten a pair of cheap Japanese or Chinese walkie-talkies for Christmas or his birthday. Got them out, and for the life of us couldn't get the things to work. Well, these were the good old days when you brought it back to the store, put it on the counter, and said, "Yo, it don't work. Make it work." And they would do their best to make it work. So I still have a vivid memory of them going through 4 or 5 boxes of pairs of walkie-talkies before they managed to get a pair that worked. Anyway, brought these walkie-talkies home and played with these walkie-talkies. Well, it wasn't too long before the neighborhood kids had a look at these things. And this is before cell phones or any of that stuff. And everybody started getting walkie-talkies. We would try to get them all on the same channel. I think back then there was about 26 CB channels, but channel 7 or 9 or something was fairly popular. Anyway, so many of the kids got these things, and we would have great manhunt games in the neighborhood, or we would team up and come up with some sort of rules about capturing a flag or some such thing. Try to set up codes between the kids. So we'd say we'd meet you at, the so-and-so's house, and we were really talking about a house 4 houses down because we had special codes. This is the thing that kids came up with imaginations-wise and all. I also have a wonderful memory of my father, not a great gift-giving person. He probably had forgotten to get me something for my birthday, so he announced, "It's your birthday. I'll take you out and get you whatever you want for your birthday." So we went off to the Lafayette radio electronics store, and I picked out a nice walkie-talkie. Usually they came in pairs. They were pretty cheap, and some kind of green or a little black plastic case or something, or maybe pink for the girls. But I had picked out one that came in a single package. It was a heavy metal case, like a cast aluminum case. I remember it was chrome on the front, and it also had a 2-channel selector on the front, so I could actually put a second set of crystals in it. And I think it kind of came with the channel that the truck drivers used, which was pretty cool because I could listen to some of the truck drivers go by on the road once in a while, chatting on that one. And then I got the requisite channel 7 or 9, I don't remember what it was, put in on the channel B on mine so I could talk to all the other kids in the neighborhood. Anyway, got this walkie-talkie, and being kind of the electronics kid I was, I knew those little 9-volt batteries didn't last very long, especially back then. They really didn't have good lithium ion and none of that stuff. You were all usually using one of those little old carbon batteries. So I had hooked up 6 C batteries to do the same job as one of those transistor batteries. Put a little extension wire on it with a snap lead I had harvested from some broken transistor radio or whatever. And when I was in the base station, I could whip the back of my walkie-talkie open because it just needed a penny to take the screw on the back off and snap it onto this extra large battery pack I had in my pocket. It didn't work very well when you were walking around, but when you were in your little fort or whatever, you could use your walkie-talkie from there. And this was just great fun. Now, I lived in a neighborhood that was more or less a one straight road with a cul-de-sac on the end and a horseshoe connected to it. So more or less we called it the circle. And there were maybe 25 houses in this. Well, a half a dozen of these or a few more of these abutted this school woods. that was, I don't know, a few acres that kind of surrounded the woods. And there was a macadam path that led from our neighborhood back to the school. And back then, they'd let the kids walk to school and walk home through these woods. Never let them do that today, but back then they did. And these woods were the greatest place to play with, of course, these walkie-talkies and everything else. And in the back part of the school, there was a steep embankment that led from a parking area where the janitors would park and where the garbage trucks and, service delivery trucks and everything would come in the back of the school that was next to these woods. And they were trying to expand that area, so they were letting dumping go on. Back then, they would just dump stuff, throw dirt over it, pave it, and you had extended your parking lot. Anyway, they had let, I think, the telephone company or power company dump a bunch of spools back there, the gigundous spools for the, overhead cabling on telephone poles. And these things are, as big as a person or whatever. Well, the kids saw these things, and we descended on them like ants on an ice cream cone on a hot summer afternoon that's been dropped on the sidewalk. And we just rolled these things off into the woods and disassembled them and started making forts. And it was great fun to just, build your little forts, and you were in there with your walkie-talkies, playing these war games with your friends. We were, kids of World War II. Not that we had served directly, but our parents were probably in World War II or involved in it, and every other movie you saw on television was World War II movies. So it was easy for the boys to see themselves in these roles, and we would, run down hills while your friend mock machine gunned you, and you would tumble down just like you had seen the actors do on television and all this kind of stuff. A very active lifestyle compared to today's kids. Anyway, so forts on the ground are great, but sooner or later, every kid wants a tree fort. Well, one of my friends, whose house abutted this thing, his father decided to put an addition on. He loved antiques, and the two of them would go antiquing up in Maine every year, where they would go to stay for a 2-week extended stay at a lake with little cottages around it. I actually got invited up there once. It was wonderful. But anyway, they were putting this addition on, and there was some extra beams, like 2x6s, 2x8s, enough we could think about, starting a tree fort. So dragged these off into the woods. And at that point, I think we had the benefit of my friend, who was a little bit older, and we managed to get the 2 beams in there. I think he might have even had a drill or something and got a couple good screws in there somehow or whatever. Anyway, we needed a 3rd beam to kind of finish off this triangle of beams before you could start putting crossboards up there to make the floorboards of your tree fort. Well, I had asked my father, and he said, "Yeah, I got a piece of wood for you, but just don't mess with my trees. Don't be banging no nails in my trees." So, anyway, after dinner, I very excited now because we had the final beam, and we had enough little short wood that we could build a fair amount of floor. A lot of this from from the little pieces of spool that we had found. And so dragged this piece of wood out. Now, we didn't have the benefit of my older friend now with this hand drill and whatever else we had used to get these other beams in, but I had gotten some huge nails and a hammer. So we dragged these things out in the woods. We had, somehow gotten a couple cross pieces in so you could kind of shimmy up the tree and use these cross pieces as a crude ladder. And we held this thing in place, and the nail went through the board okay, but when it came to this tree, I think it was an oak tree, and probably in retrospect it was a white oak or a black oak tree. One of these things, when it's alive, that is, it's like trying to hammer into concrete. And we are banging on this thing for all we're worth. Now, I brought big, thick nails, so they're not bending. And we are whacking at it, making a racket. And it's getting darker and darker and darker. Finally, we managed to get this thing up, and we get a couple of crossboards lightly tacked up in there, and we're finally, sitting up in our little tree fort, or at least a little piece of floor, just a few square feet. That's all a couple kids need to go, yeah, it's the beginnings. And we're sitting there, and all of a sudden, a cop car whips around the back part of the school where they do all this dumping. And sure enough, a minute later, the goon lights are sweeping the woods left and right, and they're getting closer and closer, and they get right under the trees underneath us. I mean, they're sweeping the ground right under us, and we're just like frozen in fear there. Kind of hug the tree and try not to move too much. Don't say a word. They're 50, maybe 70 yards away, something like that. Sure enough, after a few minutes of goon lighting with the, goon light on the side of the car, they get out of the car. I guess there's 2 officers there. They get out their flashlights and they start walking down the little macadam path that leads through the edge of the woods for the kids to walk in the morning. Now, our tree fort is not close to this macadam path because we didn't want any of the kids walking back and forth, of course, to just notice this thing real easy. Not like they weren't going to find it anyway, but I don't know how far away we were from the path, but far enough that we weren't just right on the path. So the cops walk up the path, and they are sweeping their lights left and right under us again. They never spotted us, of course not. Who's going to be looking up in the trees for, kids? But anyway, we wait 20, 25 minutes. These officers sweep the groundswell, finally get bored, get back in their car and drive away. We slithered down from the trees and back home we went. We're a little late, but the parents didn't really notice. No big deal, great. Well, next day, my friend, actually the very one we got the wood from, his father is the county prosecutor. Yeah, all this racket in the woods last night. My father called one of his cop friends, come check it out. I was like, told him, oops, well, that was us, but please don't tell your father. Now you know that you want to press subscribe if you haven't already. But some of you are leery to give out your email address. The professor understands. He gave it to Tractor Supply, and now he can't unsubscribe, and they just bombard him continuously. Such was not the case when he signed up to YouTube 23 days ago. I have received no junk mail, only 2 mails to let me know that I had instituted 2-step verification. No other junk mail came to me. Now, this is not a guarantee, but you should hit subscribe.